Adidas Power Soccer 2 is the second main game in the popular soccer series that was developed by Psygnosis for the PlayStation 2 in late 1997. Although there was a different game that was released in between both the first and the second game with Adidas Power Soccer International 97 that played very like the first game. This second game, however, was developed by a completely different development studio that utilised a different game engine where the 3D graphics and visuals and even mechanics had been completely altered compared to that of the original two titles seen in the series. That also added in a new arcade mode that allowed players to perform even more special moves, that had updated commentary methods and even had access to different stadiums, Premier League teams and different variations of national teams and top clubs that you could play as at that time, with various player rosters that were reflective of the time period as well, and also had access to multiplayer up to 4 players with a multi-tap accessory if you had access to one. From the get-go, there is a noticeable difference in terms of its visual quality compared to that of the original game. It just looks and feels like a completely different game from what was seen in the original. Now, it still has the fast-paced nature of the game, and it still has similar control features in terms of how it plays, and when you're looking to try and win the ball back, you still have to literally do 2-footed tackles and to be quite aggressive in order to win the ball back. That was what became a common trait or the main staple of the original 2 games in the series. But with this game, you have a little bit more flexibility in terms of how you can move around with the ball, because in the previous games you couldn't really have the fluidity of movement without having the ball taken off you at every opportunity. With this game, you can somewhat dribble the ball around players and move at a fast pace, but more often than not you will get past a couple of players, but then when you get closer to the goal, there's a very good chance that you will end up losing the ball very quickly, because someone will always make a tackle and win the ball off you. It is definitely a lot more fast paced, even more so than the original 2 games, and it just looks like that there's an awful lot going on the screen at any one time, because everything is just moving by so fast. Sometimes you don't even see or even realise what's really going on until it actually happens. But a lot of the control systems and even the cheeky methods that you used to use to try and score goals isn't as easy to pull off, or is pretty much non-existent in this version of the game compared to the original, as when you try to lob the keeper, there's a very good chance the keeper will nearly cop on to what you're trying to do straight away, so it's not as easy to score goals that way as it would have been in the original game. It definitely takes a lot more thought and idea and just good play in order to have a chance of scoring a goal. But from a beginner standpoint, it does play quite well for what is on offer, but it wouldn't be probably the most beginner friendly game, if I'll be totally honest. Again, because it plays very, very different from the original games, even though I will admit the 2 original games aren't easy games to pick up and play either, but just the quirkiness of the controls and just the nature of the game, that once you give it time, it is actually quite a lot of fun. It's just a very different experience for soccer games for the time, and it would only have been really reflected on and even bettered with the likes of later entries on other soccer brands with FIFA and the ISS Pro series, as they went for more realism and moved away from the arcade style of football games at that time, as everything was focused on more dynamic movements where they used motion capture for a lot of the player abilities and attributes and skills. Whereas with these type of games here like Adidas Power Soccer 2 and even many other soccer games seen on the PlayStation, those concepts weren't really as prevalent, or they weren't used as much, so it wasn't as fleshed out or as polished compared to the more popular games seen on the genre itself. The game itself did receive somewhat decent reviews, but again would have been criticised due to many of the features as I just mentioned, with the clunky controls and the limiting factors with the game. But it provided a decent and fun experience for those that were fans of the initial 2 games in the series, but it just played and felt very different, even though it still had that fast-paced nature, but it just generally felt very different compared to the previous 2 games. But again, with it being developed by a different studio, there was always going to be a lot of changes from the original formula, and the same can be said with the later entry and the final entry in the Adidas Power Soccer series with 98. That would again change the whole dynamic of the game even further. So it was an interesting time for soccer games during the 32-bit era and the 5th generation of consoles, as there was many experiments and many developers were still trying out new ideas, and they were trying to flesh out and to improve on ideas and concepts that had been worked on before. Some were successful, some probably not so much, but they're a really cool idea to see in action, to see the progress of where it started to where it was going. And again, a lot of these games, even though they may not be as popular or as well put together, they have paved the way for a lot of future games that you played later on, like the PS2, PS3 and even on modern consoles. So it is worthwhile trying them out just for nostalgic reasons alone, even though they may not be as good per se as a lot more modern games. They still are worth trying out in all respects. And I would love to know your thoughts on Adidas Power Soccer 2 for the PlayStation 1, if you have played it yourself, and if so, what do you think of it? Be sure to share it down in the comments below. And if you have enjoyed this video, make sure to leave a like, subscribe to the channel and hit the bell to be updated with future videos. And if you also want to see content around similar types of soccer games also seen on the PS1, you can check out the playlist here on the screen to see more of those games in action. And as always, keep those gaming memories alive.
Have we seen the last of the scoring? I don't think so. This fixture is well worth the entrance fee. A dreadful challenge, and that reckless attitude is unforgivable. An intense match, the grass is almost scorching.